Hey guys, today we are going to be talking about a term that Freud first came up with called oral greed. Oral greed is something that Freud suggested happens when a child in its infancy stage, their oral needs are not sufficiently met by the parent. And so they later in life become kind of a greedy person, especially in regards to greed that has to do with their mouth. So they might overeat, they might become a habitual smoker, they might hoard food, and it also can include over talking or making themselves the central focus of conversation, which I call conversational greed, which is a type of oral greed. So I looked up the term conversational greed online and I got a great description. So I'm going to share it with you. It says it can be understood as a type of communication that focuses on accumulating information or attention without genuine interest in the other person's perspective or well being. It can include interrupting, dominating the conversation, or using manipulative language to make oneself appear more knowledgeable or interesting. Key characteristics of conversational greed include a focus on self, where the primary goal is to highlight one's own knowledge, experiences, or achievements rather than engaging in a reciprocal exchange of ideas. A lack of empathy, where there's little to no effort to understand or validate the other person's perspective. Dominance, where the individual tends to control the conversational flow, interrupting or changing the subject to steer it toward their own interests. And the conversation often feels shallow and lacks genuine connection. So perhaps you're a little bit like me right now, and you're all of a sudden thinking of a million people that you know when you hear about the definition of conversational greed, which would not be surprising. It is all too common, but we just never had a term for it or a category for it before. So I want to share with you one person who comes to mind for me when I hear the word or the term oral greed or conversational greed is a woman I will call Heather. She is a former friend who had ADD, a diagnosis of ADD. And every time I would talk to her, she would just interrupt incessantly. I remember she had not succeeded in her career as a private practice therapist. And I remember thinking, yeah, if you interrupt your clients like you do your friends, I can see why you can't keep them. It would be hard to get a word in. And one time at that time, I was going back to school to become a therapist, and she knew this. So she loaned me a few of her psychodynamic therapy books. And I found that as I read them, I had a very hard time reading them. I got very distracted because Heather, just like when we talked and she interrupted incessantly, she actually did the same thing with the author of the books, where she wrote so much in the margins. And it wasn't like notes. It was more like she was talking to the author, kind of interrupting the author, and she underlined things over and over. And it was just very distracting. And I remember thinking when I was reading the books, wow, it's like she was competing for words with the author. And now in retrospect, I have to say that's what she really was doing, both with the authors and with me, is she was competing for words when I spoke. It wasn't her ADD that was making her interrupt me. It was her feeling competitive when the conversation was in my court. When I was talking about myself, she had to insert herself. So that was a type of very severe oral greed or conversational greed. But again, unfortunately, there are many people like Heather. She's just an extreme example. And when I say many people, I'm going to include myself because I am someone who is recovering from conversational greed. And I'm doing pretty well now these days, but it took awareness, self-awareness to even know that I was being so greedy. So I have said this before, but it's worth repeating. The essence of nurture is listening. This is true for a newborn baby when a parent listens to her cries, learning to discern which cries are for food, which are for sleep, and which are for being held. Now, this doesn't come naturally for many of us as parents, likely because it wasn't done for us. Rather, perhaps whenever we cried as infants, a bottle was just popped into our mouth and we got food in place of just wanting to be held, oftentimes. A nurturing parent learns to take the time to listen and learn what their child needs in the moment, not using a one size fits all approach, even though it upfront takes a lot more time. It is much more inconvenient initially. Listening entails to getting to know our child, trying to understand them at every age. We view their behavior as a language and discern what they are attempting to communicate through it, not just words, but behavior. Instead of simply judging their behavior, a nurturing parent takes a step back to understand the meaning of it and what it's trying to convey. For example, let's say a parent finds broken dishes in her teenage son's room, and she has strictly forbidden him to eat in his room. Instead of viewing this behavior as simply an act of defiance, the parent learns to read what the behavior means. She realizes it kind of seems dangerous. It kind of seems like a visual warning of a child's anger, having broken glasses and broken dishes in his room, like stay away. And she realizes that it is anger, not at him being restricted from eating in his room, but rather because the parent frequently enters that child's bedroom without his permission. So to see things in this light takes time to slow down and to seek understanding, which necessitates that we care enough to do so because our child matters that much. That parent would then show more respect for the child's privacy and autonomy by entering his room only with his permission, and she would notice that the broken dishes somehow disappear. Recently, I found Edie acting angrily with me with the same behavior that she displayed through all the many years that our relationship was so emotionally conflictual and estranged. She had no patience with me suddenly. She said that she wanted to spend more time alone out of the blue. I haven't heard that in a very long time. And so I knew this was symptomatic of me somehow hurting her in some way without my awareness. So I paused and I reflected on when her behavior started, which was that morning. This is me not being able to sleep that night. And I thought about what I had said or done in that morning to Edie. And then I realized I actually had done something that hurt her. I had said something I think that made her very jealous. So I decided to write her a letter, just letting me know how much she means to me, reassuring her that she has no rival for my attention, that she is number one. And I did not explicitly state that I thought she was jealous at something I had said, because that would embarrass her, I think, to admit that. But I did meet her need to have reassurance of how special and important she is to me. And once she read that letter, voila, we were back to normal and her behavior suddenly disappeared. So to see our child's behavior as a language and then to look underneath, what are they trying to communicate? Instead of seeing their behavior as, quote, acting out, we need to view it as a communication designed to communicate something that they need from us. It could be that they need more respect, more privacy. It could be that they need more attention or validation. It could be that they need an apology or change behavior or all of the above. When we start to attune to them, becoming detectives with the mission to understand them and helping to meet their needs, we empower them to understand themselves and to meet their own needs. One theme that I am seeing as a therapist is how utterly essential it is for parents to validate their children. I would actually go as far these days to say that an invalidating parent creates mental illness for a child. Validation of feelings makes the act of nurture complete. Our job is not to dispense advice, much less share what we've done when we were their age or when we were in a similar circumstance, because then we're derailing the attention away from them, making ourselves the focus. No, our job is to listen and to be a mirror, reflecting back what we see and hear, especially the feelings that we're hearing. So let's say Edie is in a big learning curve at her new job, and she is seeming to be frustrated. I can reflect back by saying, "It sounds really overwhelming, Edie, your new job." That's it, nothing more. This allows her to feel heard. She might respond with, not frustrating, not overwhelming, tedious. And then I would know more. I would understand her more. So notice how little I'm saying here. I'm just reflecting her back to her. I am being a mirror. She's the focus, not me. Less is more when it comes to words. This is also necessary when I am the source of her frustration, which of course is going to happen in any parent-child relationship. I usually lead with, "I hear that. I can see why you feel annoyed when I do that." Then perhaps we discuss more in detail why it bothers her and see if we can bring a solution that works for both of us. Maybe sometimes I'm just going to stand my ground. Maybe I need to explain so she can better understand where I'm coming from. Or maybe I will completely concede in the moment and give in if that's what I think would be best for everyone. But I always lead with validating her anger at me. Of course, you're annoyed. That would be objectively annoying that I do that, right? We can always do that, and we need to always do that. When we validate our children's feelings, it teaches them implicitly that they matter. This is the most powerful gift we can give to our children, and they will carry this with them the rest of their lives. A child who knows they matter will have the ego strength to someday walk away from the abusive partner or walk away from the abusive boss. We give them that gift by listening and being a mirror, reflecting back to them their importance to us. There's no shortcut. Another powerful act of nurture is learning to ask good questions. So this entails listening and allowing our curiosity to be piqued by what they're sharing with us. So I might say to Edie, "Now that you have this new job, how does it compare to your last job? Or what are some of the best and worst parts of this new job?" I do share my feedback at times when I think it is really important, but there are many times I withhold myself from telling her what to do and allow her to figure it out on her own. If she asks for advice, sometimes I'll say, "You know what do you think?" And then I will reinforce, like, "I trust you to figure this out. It sounds like you already know a lot more than anyone else would where you're at." So I'm always reflecting back how I trust her, and that helps her trust herself. That is huge. So when I allow her to figure things out on her own, sometimes I imagine she's making a mistake, and yes, I withhold from telling her so. And the reason, not always, it depends, but the reason I do that, even though it's not easy to watch her make potentially poor choices, is not, my goal is not just to shield her from pain, because that's actually not beneficial for a child of any age. That's not healthy parenting. My goal is to create a safe environment for her to learn from her mistakes and process her pain so she's not alone in her pain. And that's how she can learn from her mistakes, because learning from our mistakes is oftentimes the only way we actually learn. Suffering is not the enemy per se, but rather suffering that is unnecessary and unproductive. Pain is a vital part of life, and it is necessary to go through pain in order to have wisdom, and wisdom can be learned in no other way. My job is that she does not experience her pain in isolation, because what's shareable is bearable. Edie is now flourishing in her life at age 21, finally, because she spent many years depressed, just as I have. And I am a supporting sounding board for her these days. And nurturing her gives me such joy. I have longed to play this role for so many years when things were so hard between the two of us. And it is satisfying and it is delightful to finally play this role. It is a mutual blessing. But first, I had to learn to overcome my own oral greed. Thank God I did. I want to encourage you to share this with a friend. Please subscribe to this podcast and please give me a 5-star review. Thank you so much, guys.